You're live.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the Tahoe Truckee Unified School District Board of Directors meeting on this 20th day of October. Let's see. Pledge of Allegiance. Please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. In closed session, we had no reportable decisions. So could I have roll call, please? Roll call.
Acting President Larson.
Here.
Board Member Thriller.
Here. Here.
Member Hennessy.
Here.
Member Levac.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any changes, Superintendent Geisel, to the agenda?
Yes, Trustee Larson, in item 9.0 negotiations, we would like to reverse the order and present 9.2, which is the AB 1200 public disclosure of proposed collective bargaining agreement with TTEA first, and then after that proceed with Article 9.1, which is approve the 2021 tentative agreement between Tahoe Truckee Unified School District and Tahoe Truckee Education Association. So just flipping the order.
Thank you. With that, could I have a motion to approve the agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda with the stated changes.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Roll call or no?
Roll call.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Now we move into public comment. No action or discussion shall be undertaken on any item not appearing on the posted agenda, except the members of the board or the Tahoe Truckee Unified School District staff may briefly respond to statements made or questions posed. 3-minute time limit for each comment, with a total of 30 minutes before we move on to the next agenda, and we would continue public comment at the end of the meeting. Are there any public comments?
There are no public comment other than those that you will receive by email, for the record.
Okay. Superintendent report.
So thank you, Trustee Larson. My update is very brief this time around. We were very excited to give an update on our COVID testing mini lab updates that we have set up in our schools. And Mr. Santos can give you a really quick overview of where we're at with that.
Yes, good evening. We are set up and running at all of our sites as what we would call testing labs, where we are testing students to remain in school on modified quarantine, as well as our unvaccinated staff required on that. We've had, kind of goes in waves. You have a couple sites that might have a couple of classes on a modified quarantine, where another site might be completely quiet, but it's just a matter of time. It kind of rotates on that level. But thanks to our testing leads at all of our sites for their help and support to do this. It takes a team to pull this off, so definitely want to recognize them tonight as well.
Thank you, Mr. Santos. We did receive word just recently from CDPH that they are going to continue their universal masking for K-12 through winter. That was just hot off the presses. Also, I'm excited to say that the Excellence in Education Foundation will begin their monthly meetings in person starting in November. And of course, we have parent conferences for our elementary and middle school students the week of October 25th through 29th. And the last point I'd like to make, and it's with a heavy heart that I share that a former longtime staff member of ours, Linda Burks, and her husband passed away earlier this week. So we've been working with the family to set up a celebration of life ceremony that will be taking place in the next few weeks. Once we find out those details and set those details up, we will let our entire TTUSD community know. I know there's so many employees, past and present, that would love to honor her and her husband on that day. So want to please continue to keep her family in your thoughts. So that's all I have for today.
Thank you, Superintendent Geisels. Now we'll move on to item number 9, the one we switched.
Yes, the one we switched, a very important one we switched. So it's my pleasure to introduce for 9.2 first, we would like to have Mr. Todd Rivera talk about our AB 1200 public disclosure of proposed collective bargaining agreement with TTA. Todd?
Thank you. So as a requirement of Assembly Bill 1200, prior to the board considering a tentative agreement for salary negotiations, we're required to review and just show the financial impact of that agreement and what it will have on the district's fiscal solvency. So just to give you some overview, this agreement is for a 5% ongoing, retroactive back to July 1st. It also includes in this AB 1200 disclosure the $1,500 one-time payment that we agreed to via MOU with TTA earlier in the year. We hadn't done a disclosure for that previously, so we're adding it to this. So in this disclosure, you'll see the amounts and the cost of this agreement. For the salary schedule increase of 5%, the cost is approximately $1,221,805 in year one. The other compensation represents that one-time payment of $1,500 per TTEA member, and that's for $429,000. And then the statutory benefits that are associated with both of those is approximately $302,373. So the total compensation package for 2021-22 is $1,953,178. In year two, that drops down because we take out the one-time payment, and the total there is just a little over $1.5 million. And then year three, a little over $1.5 million once again. So as far as the financial impact, in the current year, we still end up with a positive unrestricted general fund balance at the end of the year. And in the multi-year outlook, that continues throughout. So there's no negative impact to the unrestricted general fund. However, I would note that this does not include agreements for other bargaining units at this time. And once we settle those, we'll be bringing another disclosure back to you to see what the full impact of all negotiations will be.
Thank you, Todd. Are there any questions on this item? Any questions from the audience? Comments? No. So we need, no action on that one.
It's just information. Correct, Todd? Yes.
Okay, moving on to the next item.
Now, this one we do need action happily. So I would like Ms. Zapatini to give us some details about our tentative agreement with our bargaining unit for teachers, TTEA. Ms. Zapatini?
Thank you. So we do have a tentative agreement with our teachers, TTEA, as Todd Rivera did share with you. It includes a 5% ongoing salary adjustment, retro back to July 1st, 2021. It also includes some language that has to do with supervision at the secondary level.
So are there any questions that the board might have regarding our tentative agreement?
No questions? Any comments from the audience? Let's bring it back to the board and have a motion to approve this tentative agreement.
I'll make a motion to approve 9.1.
I'll second.
Roll call vote?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye. And I'd like to add how good it makes me feel to be able to award this 5%. Okay, consent item. Are there any items you'd like to remove from the consent agenda?
No, Trustee Larson, there are not.
Any the board would like to remove? There was a comment on one. Would you like to talk about that? That was the,
Oh, overnight.
yeah.
So there was a board homework question about the overnight field trip for Truckee High, and I believe the question was about the masking, was it Trustee Larson?
It was vaccination.
Vaccination. So Mr. Santos, I had responded to that, so I'm going to have him answer that in public.
Yep, great question. I think the question was the requirements for vaccination for this overnight trip. I think it was to UCLA, from my understanding. It is required, so students who are unvaccinated would not be able to participate nor go. They would still adhere to all the mitigation measures that are required on campus, as well as to and from transportation. As far as testing goes, I think that was a question that also came up. Testing wouldn't be performed for students coming back unless they were either A, symptomatic, or they were a close contact outside of school and showing symptoms on that front. But it is required for them to have it. And Ms. Maloney and Mr. Newberger are following up with any students who are not vaccinated that are planning to go, so they can work through that.
Great. Thank you, Jeff. Is there any questions from the board for,
The only question I was having is that this now, at this point, moving forward, we will be able to do field trips?
We made a decision collectively with the leadership team that we could start field trips beginning November 1.
November 1, okay.
Yes, yes.
Awesome, thank you.
can I have a,
With that, I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
I'll second.
all in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, business services, fiscal services, approved the Sr3 Expenditure Plan. We have 3 heavy-duty presentations here this evening.
But we cruised through so much, right?
Pardon me?
We got through so much, but we've got some big ones coming up.
Yeah.
So Mr. Rivera is here to talk about our Sr3 Expenditure Plan that we are required to provide to you and get board approval prior to sending it on to the county. So Todd?
Thank you. So just wait for the presentation to come up, but the Sr3 Plan, Sr stands for Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund, and this is all related to the CARES Act through the federal government that provided funding to the states for essentially battling COVID-19, and there was language in there that required them to distribute certain amounts to public school districts. So you've heard us talk about Sr a number of times throughout the past year and a half. Sr3 obviously is our 3rd installment of Sr. Originally, we had received what they called Sr1 funds at the beginning of last school year, and that was only about $199,000. And then about midway through the year, we learned that we were going to get Sr2 funds, and that was about $1.2 million. And of course, there's always associated with federal funding requirements, parameters, regulations, whatever you want to call it, that reporting requirements, et cetera, that we have to follow through with. And it's a small price to pay because these Sr funds have really held us over the course of the last year and a half. Basically took care of all of our safety mitigation, preventative measures we did for COVID. They paid for staffing, you name it. We've used all of it. For Sr1 and Sr2, we've completely expended those dollars. This is Sr3, and the new additional requirement, actually there's a couple additional requirements with this, but the big one is that we had to do a a continuity and safety plan, which we brought to the board on July 7th. And then in addition, we had to have a expenditure plan, which is what we're covering here tonight. And it's just showing how we're planning to use the money. And some of that may change throughout the year. We may make some alterations. But this Sr funding that we're receiving is approximately $2.78 million. So it's the largest of the Sr funds that we've received. We sure can use it. There's specific requirements that we have to adhere to in the use of this money, which we'll go over here tonight. So purpose to provide an overview of the Sr3 plan. And then Sr3, I kind of already explained it, Emergency Relief Act related to the impact of COVID-19 on elementary and secondary schools. So how can we use Sr3? Pretty much any way we've used ESSER 1 and ESSER 2, there's this big, long list of how we can use that money. A lot of it was associated with any activity authorized by ESEA, which, Val, do you know what that is? Elementary Secondary Education Act. And I'm sorry, I didn't mention, Val and I worked on this together, and we're going to kind of tag team, and I kind of took over a little bit, so I apologize.
I'm good.
Anyway, so there's a lot of things listed in that Elementary Secondary Education Act. A lot of it's related to, underserved students, Title I, low-income English learners as well. Also preventing the spread of COVID-19, so anything we have to do for safety mitigation at the school sites, addressing the needs of low-income and disabled students, and addressing learning loss. That's a big one that we really tried to tie to this plan here today. And then there's also one requirement that's unique with the ESSER funds, and that's we had to put a set-aside of 20% of the money to address lost instructional time. And some of the examples of that and how you can address lost instructional time would be extended day, and summer programming, any after-school tutoring, and then, of course, any additional mental health supports that you provide at the school sites. So the sections, there's 4 main sections of the ESSER 3 Expenditure Plan. Do you want to cover this, Val, or you want me to go through it? Okay.
Okay, so under the 3 sections, the first one is the big summary of the planned expenditures, and that's a big part that Todd put together with the numbers. And then there's the community engagement, actions, expenditures, and little subcategories, and then the 4th one. So do you want to go to the next slide?
Yep.
Sure. So the summary of expenditures?
So the summary of plan expenditures, this is just the different categories that we're required to report in our expenditure plan. Continuous and safe in-person learning, which is associated with most of the mitigation and safety things that I mentioned before, addressing impact of learning loss, and then use of remaining funds, which kind of is a catch-all. So you'll see the smallest amount we have dedicated is continuous and safe in-person learning of about $550,000. I'll go over some detail of what we're spending that. Most of that we've actually already spent or encumbered. Addressing impact of learning loss, about $1.2 million of this plan is associated with that, and then the use of remaining funds, just about another $1 million.
And then the next big section is the community engagement section, formerly known as stakeholder engagement. We've shifted our language a little bit, and we'll now be using school community engagement. And so this plan, like all the other plans that we do for our state, have this required component. And we were able to leverage the past community engagement that we've received from 4 other plans that we've completed in the last a little bit over a year. We've completed 4 different plans, and I've listed them there up on the left side of the screen. So with those 4 different plans, we've had over 33 different types of meetings. They've either been, board meetings, public hearings, school site councils, ELACs, and we felt that, not even felt, but we know that the actions that we've included in this ESSER plan line right up with what the input that was provided during those engagement meetings, because what we're including in these plans, this ESSER 3 plan, is truly an extension of the best practices that we're implementing this year that we know we want to continue.
So looking at the different categories here, actions and expenditures to address student needs, which kind of encompasses all those 3 main categories. Continuous and safe in-person learning. This is associated with anything we need to do to safely operate the schools for in-person instruction and be able to continue that so that kids can come to school every day. Also, reducing the spread of COVID-19, which is a big factor in that, any safety mitigation, and also includes the testing protocols that we have currently in place as well. So looking at what we've actually spent or plan to spend, we have some things related to air filtration. We did recently some maintenance and balancing for our air circulation at some of our major campuses to make sure they're operating at optimum levels. Air filters and purifiers, a lot of those we purchased last year, but we had to purchase additional ones, partially because we were starting to eat inside the cafeteria and inside classroom spaces. We have more kids now, so we wanted to provide the sites with as many as they needed. Signage and decals, most of that we did last year, and those decals were pretty good quality because they're still on the floors and walls, and they haven't moved. So I think we're going to have to probably tear up some flooring to get those off when we're all done with this. Mask and barriers, outdoor shades and tables. A lot of the sites wanted to do outdoor eating, so we provided some tables and umbrellas and other things so they can do that. Water bottles, we bought a second round of water bottles for all the school sites. And then also associated with this, we kept on our additional temporary nurse that we had last year to support basically contact tracing and anything else the sites needed with relation to that. So campus monitors are also included in that as well. We provided some additional campus monitors at a couple of our campuses.
Todd,
And-
could I ask a
Yep.
question here? The 5-minute tests, I understand they're not cheap, and so we have to provide those. Are they included in one of these categories, or they didn't, not that expensive? And the stipend for the people who do the testing?
Yeah, at this time, we would probably put those in the other remaining funds category, and we can move them between sections if we need to, but we have a remaining balance that we'll be applying to anything else we need. And at the time, I don't think we really had the actual cost of testing yet, but that would go in that last category, which I'll cover here in a little bit. You'll see, too, that we have two columns, 2021-22 expenditures. Those are all things that we have planned or encumbered to spend this year. But then also, we know that some of this stuff we're going to have to continue next year. And, potentially maybe even year after for some of these things. But we've kind of just kept it into the next 2 years for right now, but some of this may change. We may not spend everything in 21-22, and that some more may carry over to next year, but we'll definitely find uses for this. So a total of $550,000 total in this category.
Okay, in one of the other sections here, addressing the impact of lost instructional time. So again, as Todd explained, we have our expenditures split into this school year and then into next school year as well. And so this school year, we're planning to use some of the Sr3 funds to do some of the actions that we've already implemented. Letters training, we're also making sure that our students that are on quarantine are getting instruction from their teachers, the extra technology that we might need as students are needing to access higher levels of technology and more digital licenses and such. And then also the additional professional development days and extra duties. Some of that is related to our letters training, and then some of it is also related to substitute teacher support that is supporting some of our schools in not providing an extra like homeroom classroom, but just like an extra support teacher to support some of our grades that have some classes that are a little bit impacted.
So I have a question or two on this one. So these items on that slide were all improving the teaching capability, but it's about providing lost instructional time. So what are we doing to provide extra time for those students that were impacted?
That's a great question. So the quarantine instruction is one that helps, like under normal, the student might just be out on an independent study contract or may not be able to receive instruction from home. So we were able to partner with TTEA to make that available. So the classroom teacher is actually meeting with those students when they're out on quarantine. And then the additional, a lot of the extended day opportunities and office hours are coming out of the extra duty and in some cases the substitute teacher support. I know we have at least one school that's looking to have substitute teachers come in and help provide some of that extended day before and after school enrichment. So that the biggest biggest bulk of that is in the extra duty.
It seemed to me that we probably should have had the next report first, so we could see where it needed to be spent.
Sure,
But
sure.
Thank you.
Yep. Yes.
What is letters, please?
I'm sorry. I am sorry that I left that acronym up there. It stands for language, oh my gosh. Jenny knows, Susie knows. Letters, language essentials, oh my gosh, I can't, it's not off the top of my head. Teachers of reading, thank you very much. Or thank you, and I'm sorry for having that acronym up there. Yep. Okay, so looking into the next school year, to address the impact of lost instructional time and definitely improving the instruction that's happening in the classroom through our letters training is definitely one way to address that, because it's going to make that first instruction even more effective. And then continuing the instruction for students that are out on quarantine, we're anticipating we'll need to do that. Continuing to make sure that our technology is at the level that we need it to be to continue to provide, virtual type opportunities for the students. And then continuing office hours, continuing extended day, looking at additional professional development days. That's been tricky this year, and I imagine it might next year too, because we don't have substitutes. So that part of the pot, we haven't tapped into too much, but we do have teachers that are working outside of their regular day, like through the letters and other professional opportunities, and getting extra duty to enhance their skills. And then outside of the school day or school year, with the extended program, we are anticipating to offer a similar program this coming summer that we had offered this last summer. So we have allocated money to continue our Power Summer Boys and Girls Club partnership. We're hoping to expand that, continue to support Aim High, and then our amazingly successful summer high school credit recovery. We want to continue that, and then of course transportation and any other snacks and food that are associated with that program.
And also just to note too, by using Sr3 for our summer program, we're actually leveraging the funding on something that normally would be funded with our unrestricted general fund that we do year after year. So we're actually saving money as a result. So these are just some of the line items here for addressing the impact of learning loss, letters training. The estimate of that total is about $425,000, almost $426,000. The one-time payment for teachers, we went over that in AB 1200. The total cost of that is about $482,000. That's being paid for with Sr3 funds, and it's associated because essentially it's for additional work required of the teachers to have to deal with quarantined students in their classroom for additional assignments and everything else. Summer programs estimated about $200,000 for that, and then some small amounts for technology supplies. And like I said, some of the stuff is going to change throughout the course of the year. We're going to decide we're going to want to spend more in this category, and we'll make those adjustments. Use of remaining funds, that's pretty much kind of a catch-all for everything else, and it includes a lot of important things too, so it's not inconsequential. It's things like mental health supports and social-emotional supports for students, but it also includes, things that we just maybe don't know exactly what else we need to spend this money on too. So just to give you an example, this is the category that we're funding our middle school wellness centers out of over the course of this current fiscal year and next year. And then after that, if we continue with those would come out of our general fund. Additional temporary community liaisons, interpreter, translator. I'm not sure what site, but it's something that we carried forward from last year. And then additional counseling support, trauma-informed training is another one of those things that we did with our ELO plan, but we'll probably continue on. And just to remember, our expanded learning opportunity plan, we were about $700,000 or $800,000 over on that. So everything that we couldn't cover with our ELO plan is going to Sr3, and that's reflected in a lot of these numbers. So just the total cost here, counseling, an additional $47,000. Middle school wellness centers over the next 2 years is about $260,000. That's staffing for those, materials, supplies. Trauma-informed training came to about $26,000 this year. And then additional classified and certificated support, which is kind of a catch-all right now because we're going to need, like, Board Member Larson suggested about extending the day or tutoring or something like that. That's the category that we can pull that from if we need to, along with testing and anything else we need. So a total of $1,019,000.
Okay, so a big part of this plan is also ensuring that what we're doing with the students is making a difference. And not only do we have some systems within this plan, we've already created out of the ELO actions and goals, monitoring systems not required by that plan that actually you'll see reflected in this plan, if that makes sense. So ELO didn't require a progress monitoring plan, ESSER does. And so what we had designed for ELO goals, we're actually getting a chance to share here in this plan. So, and you will get a little bit more information in the presentation on the CASP state data. That tells you a little bit more here. So, some of what we're doing is we're starting with looking at data. That's a big part of it. We are implementing effective professional learning communities with a focus on looking at the data and doing improvement cycles. So for instance, if there's a group of teachers that are doing office hours, they would then take a look at the students' office hours. Maybe they're going to look at their grades on an assessment. And they're going to say, okay, this part they're not doing very well right now. I'm now going to provide this student 3 hours of office hour and focus on this specific concept, and then come back and assess and see if that makes a difference. So that's a real simple way. It's action research, right? Like, this is our current reality. Here's our goal. This is what we want to do about it. We do what we plan to do, and did it work or did it not work, right? Or do we need to adjust? So that's the short version of what's happening with monitoring students. We are also we will be looking at, as teachers are submitting their extra duty timesheets for the ELO office hours or extended duty, extended day, or for Sr3 funding, they're required to turn in an attendance list, like who came to your office hours, who was supposed to come, who actually came, and then using that information, we're going to then what they call tag them. We're going to identify them in our new data management student learning system, EduClimber, and then we'll be able to pull those students as a district whole to say, okay, these were the students that were supposed to get like office hours. These students never came. These students came. Let's see what kind of impact was made on their learning from coming. And then the other part about this too, which is really cool, is not only will the schools be able to monitor their group of students, we will also be able to monitor, like, okay, these 10 students are supposed to come for your after school program. 5 of them are coming, but 5 aren't. So it's an opportunity for, in this case, Susie or I, right, to reach out to that school and say, tell us what's going on here so that we can better help support the school in having the students show up for any extended learning opportunities. So we can do the same thing in the system with different types of interventions and supports that we're providing through these funds. Yes.
I'm a little confused, and I think I'm just hung up on the office hours, because my understanding is that the office hours can be a 5-minute, hey, can you clarify this? But this sounds like, what you're presenting sounds like maybe repeated visits on the, like extra help.
Yes.
So are you differentiating those two types of needs?
In this case, we definitely would. When we're talking with schools about office hours and when Susie Phoebus, the ELO coordinator, is working with principals, that's what we're referring to, are those students that are in need of extra support and having a list of who those students are so that we can identify them. Yeah, it's not just the drop-in. It's the, hey, you need to be with me 2 times a week at this time. Those are the students we will monitor.
So I have a question about that. The objective here is to identify students who have slipped somehow. Or I think we'll even stretch it to have been slipping for 10 years, and we need to do something about it. So is the board going to be able to see some reports on how you identify these needs, what you did about these needs, and what the outcome was? Now, you can't tell us the student or the name, but you can tell us the school that they're from and categorize or collect them together, just so I'm sure the government would like to know, hey, is this money being spent
Absolutely.
effectively?
Yep.
And so would the board, so would this board member.
Yes, and we would too. We want to make sure that whatever actions we're implementing are making a difference for our students, their learning and their social emotional learning, for that matter too, because this money can be spent in that way.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So at this time, are there any other questions that we could answer for the board?
Does the board have any questions?
Okay.
Are there any comments from the audience?
Your mic's not on, Mr. Larson.
I'm sorry. No questions from the board. Are there any comments from the audience? Nope. Okay. Is there action required?
Yep.
Yes, we have to approve this plan.
Yes.
So do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the Sr3 plan.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. Thank you. Well, now we have a public hearing for instructional materials and textbook sufficiencies or insufficiency.
Yes, Trustee Larson. Ed Code requires us, districts, to hold a public hearing before the end of the 8th week from the first day that pupils attend class in order to determine whether each pupil in each school in the district has sufficient textbooks or instructional materials or both. So to talk more about this and to conduct the public hearing, I turn it over to Ms. Simpson. Val?
Yes, thank you. So as Superintendent Geisel said, we are required to hold this public hearing, and I would like to let the public know and the board know that we have received from each school principal the assurance document where they have spoken to their librarian tech or library. That is the staff member who's responsible for making sure that our students have access to their instructional materials. And all of our schools have confirmed that all students have access.
Any questions? Any comments from the audience? Any comments from the public? No, okay. So now we have to approve those, is that it? Okay.
Or just close it. Yeah, we don't have
So you,
Close the hearing.
right.
Close the hearing.
I was so done.
So,
And it was just an information item. There's no action to be taken, correct, Ms. Simpson? Yes. Right,
so now educational services, approve instructional materials,
right.
sufficiency and insufficiency.
That takes action, yes, sir.
Okay.
All right, Ms. Simpson, do you want to go with 14.1?
Okay, so the second part of the approve, the textbook sufficiency and insufficiency process is approving that we have available instructional materials for all of our students.
Any questions? And so, any questions, comments from the audience? No. So we need to approve these reports.
I'll make a motion to approve 14.1.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. So now we move into the California Assessment of Students' Performance, Progress.
Yes, the California Assessment of Student Performance and Progress, or the CASP, was established in 2014, and it replaced our standardized testing, the old STAR, if you can recall that. So to show us an overview of our student performance in our district, Ms. Simpson will be providing you a presentation this evening.
Get myself organized here. All right. Okay, well, thank you for the opportunity to share how our students did this last spring on our state assessments. I'm starting out tonight with two foundational pieces that are really important in our district because they are at the heart of everything that we do around our students and the culture of accountability, and truly are at the heart of this presentation as well. So tonight, I will be presenting an overview of our students' performance on our state assessments in the areas of English, language arts, and math. Before I get to those actual results, I have three things that I wanted to share that is good information as we move into the results. Explaining what the CASP is, also explaining, well, how do we use this and how does this connect to some of the major documents and plans in our district? And then also a snapshot of what our enrollment demographics looked like last school year during our count day. So starting with the California Assessment of Student Performance and Progress. It's a mouthful. This actually is the acronym and term for a group of assessments. So there's actually 7 different assessments that fall under the umbrella of the CASP. They fall into English language arts, math, and also science. And there's also a newer one that's on there, the California Spanish Assessment. It was being piloted right before COVID, and so now it's officially on our list. I also want to just call attention to, there's the Smarter Balance, English Language Arts, and Math, and then there's also the California Alternative Assessment for our students with IEPs. They take an alternative assessment should the IEP team feel that that is appropriate for them. Oops. And how the CASP and all of our amazing plans work is really truly about alignment. And so one of the major plans, although it's on deck to be revised, right, is our strategic learning plan, our Pathways 2020 plan. And one of the biggest goals that aligns with the CASP is the one around teaching and learning. So that's the beliefs. We have the strategic plan being the next level. I'm having clicking problems. There we go. And then there's our local control and accountability plan, which we know has 3 major goals. Those 3 goals fall into the area of student learning, adult learning, and then safe, supportive, and collaborative environments under goal number 3. So that's the next level. And then those goals and actions translate down to our school plans for student achievement, formerly known as the school accountability plan. So this is the term we're using moving forward. And all of these plans are all monitored. One way of monitoring them is through our CASP results. because the goals and actions tied in these main plans, particularly the Local Control Accountability Plan and the School Plan for Student Achievement, are directly tied to our state assessment results. So just a look here at our enrollment demographics. These numbers were taken as of what we call count day not this October, the previous October in 2020. At that time, we had about 3,923 students enrolled in our district. And it's interesting because our percentages of student groups remains relatively stable, while I know we're in like we're experiencing a little bit of decline. But these percentages have been pretty much what they've been, with just a little bit of variability up and down. So that's the percentage of students in each one of those student groups. So there's Hispanic, there's the white student group, we have our English learners, EL, and then our reclassified English proficient, RFEP, socioeconomic disadvantaged is SED, and then students with disabilities is SWD. Okay, so background, now we're moving into our actual results. And we will be starting with the first slide here, our first graph. This is the district-wide overall. So these are all the students that took the CASP SBAC in English Language Arts in 3rd through 8th grade and 11th grade. Those are the grades that we test. And this graph represents the percentage of students who have met or exceeded the standard. It is 3 years worth of data. So you'll see 2018, so that's 17-18 school year, 2019, 18-19, and then you see 2021. We did not administer the CASP in 2020. So there's a little bit of a jump right there. So with this graph, what is jumping out at you?
That's an invitation.
Sure, absolutely.
So I look at this and I say, what is this telling me? Well, all of our students, 60%, that's not even 2/3, are proficient. Now, what do we think that ought to be?
What do you think it should be?
A lot more than that.
I agree. We should be, I would say, at least up in the 80%.
Uh-huh.
Absolutely.
So what are the other, let's say 40% of the students that aren't proficient? How are they doing?
They're nearly met or not meeting standards. We do have that can be like, I definitely would love to come back and share, or maybe in a study session, be able to show you how the groups, like we kind of call it the box cars. So level 1, level 2, level 3, and level 4.
The question that comes to mind, though, about those students is how many of them are improving a year each year or more? I mean, in other words, are those 40% going downhill or are they going uphill? And will they catch up? And what are we doing for them? I mean, which is where ESSER comes in. We still have, like after 11 years that I've been watching this data, the gap is still there. I mean, there are some good newses here and there on some grades, and we ought to understand that. But is there a fundamental reason? I mean, I think we ought to be wrestling with, is there a fundamental reason why the RFEPs, that are reclassified English proficient, why aren't 70 or 80% of them? I mean, are we looking at that kind of stuff and saying?
Yes, we are.
What
It was
should
one of
we-
our first meetings with the principals in August.
Okay, so the principals need to get into this. And the students with disabilities, that's a tough one. I mean, holy crow. that's a completely different analysis. So to say that we're doing a good job or bad job, we have no idea. I mean, maybe we do, I hope we do, but the board doesn't with that number. So the other thing I would say about this slide, these tests were given in May and June
Yes,
of 2021.
yes.
So that's near the end of the school year. We were going through distance learning, and we had some modified, hybrid in-person learning going on at the end of the year. The black line up there, which is after distance learning, does not look like the world crashed and burned. So it's hard for me to conclude that we need Escher to catch these students up. We need to do great things with Escher to get all of the students up.
Correct. And those funds allow us to provide a lot more than what we, like to implement some of our dreams, I guess you could say.
So my point is, you look at a slide like that and you can say, okay, here are numbers, they've gone up and down over the years. And so what does that mean? You need to look at them and say, okay, what should we be doing here? What is this telling us? And I'd like to see this data by schools. It's fine to see the overall district-wide, but as you get into sixth grade, seventh grade, it would be pretty interesting to know how each middle school did.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so are we going to see that kind of stuff?
I would need to speak with the superintendent. I would be happy to provide it.
Well, I think the
Yeah.
principals probably need to be
Yeah.
doing.
Or the principals provide it, yeah. We have it available.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
That was it for
Yep.
this slide.
Okay.
But I have other thoughts.
Yes.
So brace yourself, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
no, and data is like an onion, not because of the smell, but because, right, you peel it back and you have more questions, right? Okay, so these next two slides are looking at the grade level. Oops, I didn't push the button. There we go. So here we have each grade level. And again, this is all third graders for 3 years, all fourth graders for 3 years, and all fifth graders for 3 years. And you can, again, see here, relatively flat, a little bit of a dip in fourth grade, but not a dramatic change in third, fourth, and fifth. Getting into sixth, seventh, eighth, and 11th grade, we start to see a little bit more of an impact of the hybrid distance learning COVID, particularly in that sixth grade. That's a pretty significant decrease, as well as eighth grade. And 11th grade, whoo! Hang on to that as we go through this presentation.
So let's go back a slide.
Okay. Which one do you want to go back to? Third,
Just-
fourth, and
just-
fifth?
Yes.
Okay.
So you look at that and you say, what's going on here? Well, first off, 2018, third grade, 2019, and 2021, those are 3 different groups of kids.
Correct.
So we're comparing groups of kids, not necessarily how well our instructions went during that year. And when you look at this in one of your conclusions, you said that fifth grade drops. Well, fifth grade 2021 was
Fourth grade went down a little bit.
third grade
Yeah.
in 2018.
You have to like skip a year.
2019.
Yep.
It was third grade, which is 58%. And so those students are up to 62%. So they improved, yet the conclusion in here was fifth grade was down. So I'm saying if you don't look at cohort stuff, you're going to reach the wrong conclusion.
Correct. And I think that you need to look at it in both ways, because this is the way the state looks at it. And so that's what I'm presenting tonight, is that state view. Coming back with a cohort analysis, I would be happy to do. It's just, it's a different perspective.
I think we need to look at it with intelligence, and if the state's doing it wrong, we shouldn't be doing it the way the state's doing it. And
If, Trustee Larson, if I can interject here, the reason why the state does this is because it not only looks at students learning, it looks at teachers' instructional practice. So then you look at a repeated history of a certain specific grade level over a certain period of time, you can see a trend. So it's not just about, it is about the student learning, but also this gives us information about the instructional practices going on in a particular grade level. So you see that going on. And then there should be vertical planning. In other words, here, fourth grade, here's everything those third graders need to know. Here, second grade, here's everything that, first grader needs to know. And that is what the state is looking at. So maybe it's a philosophical disagreement, but it is what it is for districts across the state, and that's why it's this way. We can certainly come back with cohort data.
yeah, it is a philosophical difference.
And just to let you know, I did look like you did, boom, boom, boom. That wasn't the point of view, I guess, for this presentation tonight.
But when you
Yeah.
reach the wrong conclusion, like grade 5th is worse, that's a problem.
Perspective, different perspectives, yeah. Yeah.
Galen, I always so appreciate and respect your input and your questions. I'm trying to understand though, are we then looking at teacher accomplishment or are we being presented student data? I'm not understanding, based on your input, Superintendent, what we're looking at now. I thought it was student. That's why I was tracking with your questions, but then we're hearing that the state is also tracking teaching. So what are we supposed to be interpreting for this?
Yeah, that's a good question.
So for example, if you look at third grade, 49% in 2018 met or exceeded standards. Then they jump to fourth grade, that would be the purple. 60% of them did great. They met or exceeded standards. Then if you jump to fifth grade, that color would be what? The black.
There's no data there, so
Right.
it stops.
It stops.
We don't have state data in 2020.
All right,
So you can only look basically a 2-year,
gap.
yeah.
So the state requires us to look at teaching trends per grade level, but what we're doing is also looking at student data. Now, if we can drill down to the school, we can also drill down to the cohort if we need
Yep,
to. It will take us
absolutely.
some time to put those presentations together, but that's what Ms. Simpson can bring back for you if you're interested in that, which I'm getting a very strong sense that you are.
Yes. Yes.
Well,
Yes, I think that it is very important to look at data in different perspectives. This is one look, right? And so coming back with a different look gives a different perspective.
to answer your question, Chris, this is the kind of data that we've been seeing for 10 years. And it doesn't lead to, here's the problem, we need to work on this problem. We tried to get the principals to do cohort data so they can say, yep, this year our teachers or our programs that we had or whatever got more students into the proficient level at that grade than were where they were the year before. So now we know, yeah, that worked. When it goes the other way, like the 6th grade, you say, well, what went on there? And you learn just as much, but if you don't look at cohort data, you don't have a clue. I mean, you even reach incorrect decisions. I'm sorry.
Well,
It's
no.
just that I'm very frustrated and
I
I'm running
understand.
out of time.
I understand.
And
And,
you also request this once or twice a year,
Yeah.
every year.
yeah, no, and I understand what you're saying, and I want to assure you that my department, Ed Services, we don't stop at this graph. We go down to the student level. Like, we look at those, who moved, who didn't move, we're looking at scaled scores. We have that school data available. So you just have to keep drilling down. But by no means does this district stop at that. Every single school principal and teacher is down at the student level.
They've got that.
And
Okay.
looking at not just levels, but scaled scores. Because sometimes a student goes up in a scaled score, but doesn't necessarily move a level.
So
Yep.
for the purposes of time.
Yes.
If Ms. Simpson can go through the presentation, and then what we can do at a future meeting, come back with more specific presentations, right, that you've talked about, Trustee Larson, and I'm getting the sense that the rest of the board would like to see that as well.
Yes.
Let me ask one more question on this slide, then I have multiple and I'm getting the message that I've had my time. But what happened to the third grade Everybody Reads program? I don't see any mention of that.
That's a great question. That wasn't the purpose of this presentation. This presentation is an overview of state data, not an analysis of our third grade reading performance. So if that's a question you would like answered, I'd be more than happy to come back and answer that with a separate analysis.
But the board's responsibility is to monitor the progress of our students.
Yes,
And I don't feel we're doing that.
understood.
Thank you.
Yes. Okay, so I think we went through this slide. So not going to spend too much time here because we've already talked about these 3 slides. Based on this type of analysis, the year-over-year analysis, we did see decreases in all of our student groups except for our students with disabilities. And as Trustee Larson mentioned, there is an achievement gap, which we'll look closer at as we get into the grade level data. Some other important information here, 6th grade year-over-year data did go down by 15 percentage points, and we did have an increase at the 11th grade. Moving into the next set, we're going to be looking at each grade level, student group, 3-year data. So you'll be able to see it is, again, year-over-year data. Oops, I think I pressed too far. So looking here at 3rd grade, again, this graph is the percentage of students who have met or exceeded standard. We have our 7 different student groups along the bottom, 2018, 2019, and 2021 data. So you can do a little cohort hop, a 2-year, if you wanted to kind of see how the groups are doing. And you can see here that our reclassified students, our RFEPs, really knocked it out of the park, as well as students with disabilities and our white student group. So that's 3rd grade. This is 3rd grade, all 3rd graders. Okay, next slide we have here is our 4th graders. Again, there's a little bit of a pattern going on here. Our reclassified students and our students with disabilities made significant gains, 17 points for those that RFEP student group. Going into 5th grade, again, RFEP, you can see EL students, there was a decrease there. Students with disabilities, a bit of a decrease as well. And then here's the 6th grade. You saw in the overall, the 6th grade, pretty significant decrease in the level of proficiency. It's reflected here in the student groups as well. With the biggest loss, I would say, is around the Hispanic and our RFEP students. And into 7th grade, again, 3 years worth of data. Looking at our 8th grade. Our white student group had a sizable decrease in ELA. And then our 11th grade students overall made some gains there, except for the EL student group. So in summary, some of the highlights there of that data, and looking at the different student groups, we had our 3rd, 4th, and 7th grade be able to, 3 out of the 7 student groups made improvements. 6th grade went down in all student groups, and then our 11th grade made improvement to 6 out of the 7 student groups. Across all the grade levels, The students that improved more than other students was the white student group, are reclassified to fluent English proficient, and our students with disabilities. And our Hispanic and our English learners made the least amount of gains from between those 2 years of assessments. So there are celebrations in there. So we are celebrating several student groups. We're celebrating our reclassified to fluent English proficient. You can see that in 4 grade levels, they made double-digit gains from the group 2 years before that. And our students with disabilities, 3rd grade, double-digit gain, and also in 11th grade. Our white student group, meeting and exceeding standards in 3rd or 11th with some increases to percentage of proficient or meeting standards, exceeding standards. And then one of the final celebrations in this presentation is that our 11th grade made gains with 8% percentage points with the all-student group, and then 5 and then 9 with our socioeconomic disadvantaged students. And then there's the challenges. So looking at these challenges, as Trustee Larson mentioned, is the achievement gap. And it's significant when we look at comparing how our students are doing to our student groups are compared to the highest performing student group. On this slide, it ranges anywhere from 38 percentage point gap to 63. And on our slide here, it's anywhere from 25 to 75. So we do have work to do. We've had work to do. Oops. And I was going to pause there. I don't think we have time for questions and comments on this section. Okay, perfect. So I'll pause right here, and if there's questions or comments. Okay, we're going to move on to the section on math. So here we have our district-wide, similar to the English Language Arts section. The first slide here is our all students 3rd through 8th grade that took the SBAC math test at 3rd through 8th and 11th grade, 3 years worth of data. And earlier, it was mentioned that math was one of the harder subjects to learn while in hybrid or COVID, and we're seeing that trend not only in our district but across the nation, and this is definitely needs to be addressed. Year over year, this is 3rd grade, 4th grade, and 5th grade. And then our 6th through 8th and then 11th grades. You see again that drop in 6th grade and in 8th grade. Same pattern as in our language arts scores. So a couple of overview summary statements here. We did have some student groups slightly increase, and however, we did have 5 that decreased. Hispanic pretty significantly by 12 percentage points. And then there's that achievement gap again. A little bit more summary here. Decrease, 11th grade increasing, and some double-digit decreases there for 5th, 6th, and 8th. So moving into each grade level now, so as like we did with the language arts, you have each grade level with the student group, so disaggregated by student group. These are all the 3rd graders that tested this last spring, the percentage of students meeting or exceeding standards. Our English learners, a little bit better here in math in 3rd grade. Our 4th grade data shows a decrease across all of our student groups. The largest decrease is showing in our white and our RFEP student group. Our fifth grade scores in math. Again, there's some significant year-over-year drops. That's not what we want to see, obviously. RFEP students in fifth grade, they did okay, gained just a little bit. Sixth grade, similar dips. Very low proficient numbers for our English learners, our RFEPs, our SED students. Seventh grade. What's bothersome, that's all bothersome. This seventh grade, even though it's year over year, you see the all student group, that stairway is going the wrong way. So should be going the other way. So if you look at the all student group and you see the red bar graph on the left is high, and then the next year it goes down, and then it's supposed to go the other way. Yep. And that's what we're going for, are those just stair steps up. Eighth grade.
A pandemic.
Yeah, yeah.
It's nobody's fault.
Yeah, no. You're right.
I mean, it's actually, it could be much worse.
Yes,
And the fact that it's actually not much worse is encouraging.
yes,
So yeah, the staircases are going in the wrong direction.
Yes.
But in a couple of years, hopefully we
we're
can
going to get it back up.
correct that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And here's our 11th grade. Kind of holding their own there, despite the pandemic and hybrid and distance learning. So looking here across, how did our grade levels do with their student groups? Not quite as well as the English language arts scores, but we did have in 3rd and 11th, 4 out of the 7 student groups did make increases in the percent meeting and exceeding standard. 6th through 8th, only 1 student group, and 4th, 5th, and 7th actually decreased in all the student groups. So no gains at those grade levels. There you go. And then looking at which student groups overall, our students with disabilities in the area of math actually improved more than any other student group. And in third grade, our English learners, our RFEPs, our socioeconomic disadvantage, and students with disabilities. So all 4 subgroups did well in 3rd grade. And 3 subgroups, or student groups, did well in 11th grade. And what was interesting, this last bullet here, is that our white student group actually made the least amount of gains when you're looking at comparing it to the different student groups. So our celebrations on this is just 1 slide, but there are 4. Our 11th grade, we're celebrating, they hung in there, our students with disabilities, and then obviously the 3rd and the 11th grade with those particular student groups. And our challenges, again, the achievement gap. Anywhere from 32 to 49 percentage points, depending on which student group you're looking, which 2 student groups you're looking at. Questions, comments? Sure.
I'm sorry if I'm supposed to know this, and two-way immersion not included, but maybe they are. English learners and RFEP students, how are they learning math? Are they learning it in Spanish or in English?
They are, at Kings Beach, they are learning it in Spanish in the early years, and then they're transitioning to English. So there's still some support. Across the district, they're learning it in English. If they are a newcomer student or a student with limited English, like they're relatively new, then we do have Spanish textbooks and supports that we can provide them to help them with the, addressing the language and still being able to be successful with math.
What does that support look like? Do we have like a school translator that buddies up with them during math class, or what does that look like?
It actually really depends. It depends on what's the staff that's available at the school sites. For instance, at the elementary schools, it could be that there's a bilingual staff member that helps the child. It could be that they are also maybe just working with the English language coordinator. So they don't necessarily speak Spanish, but they can then at least kind of help make sure they have the materials. At our middle schools, we have bilingual aides that go in and help the students more specifically in those classes. That is an area in our district for us to look closer at, is how we're supporting our newcomers, particularly at the secondary level. So that's on our list of things to do this year.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from the board? Any comments from the public? And this is information.
Oh, I still have the next steps. So I know you want to know what we're going to do about it. What are we doing about it? So yes,
I'm sorry about that.
yes, that's okay, that's okay. So next steps, and these next steps, if you look on this slide, they're actually next steps that are already in action. And so this is where, like, lifting the mood a little bit of the group here, things that we have already started and I'm excited about. So full administration of our district local assessments, the ones that are listed there. That means every student in the district this year took either, if they're, depending on the grade level, and whether they had an IEP or not, took one of these assessments. Kindergarten has different assessments, and TK has different assessments. That is a milestone. So with that information, we now have common data that we can dig into down to the student level and figure out what do we need to do differently to improve with these assessments that we're using on a shorter, we're not going to wait to the end of the year, I guess is what we're saying. So that's a big piece. Professional development and training is happening around assessments too, like which reports do we pull, which ones, there's so many, let's focus just on a few and make sure people understand those well and how to use them and how to access them. So that's some of what's already in action. We also have, this is another kind of a big milestone for our district with the EduClimber part. DNA, data and assessment, that's a platform that is migrating from, you may have heard us say IO, EDMS IO in the past. The DNA system is the platform where teachers can create and administer assessments. There is some ability to do data analysis, but not like EduClimber. This is the first time in my career here in Tahoe Truckee Unified that we've had one system where we can go to for data. Mining data has been an incredible challenge in this district and has taken away the time for us to actually do the conversations and the planning for next steps. So with this EduClimber program, all the data is going into one spot, and the idea is that it's predominantly a one-stop shop that our administrators can use to monitor students that are RSP and special ed. You have an IEP, you can call up that student and get a printout with all the students' data. So that is a huge milestone for us. And we are launching it tomorrow is our first training with the administrators. I could keep going on and on. Our plan is reading intervention teachers, EL coordinators, coaches, lead teachers, and we're going to keep going systematically training in little chunks. And the other big part of this is not only quick access, but easy access. And then the other part of this next steps already in action, I mentioned in the ESSER, the improvement cycles in our professional learning communities. We have teams of teachers working together. We don't necessarily have teams of teachers working together regularly, looking at data, going out and making a change and coming back to see if that change made a difference. That is the difference that we're implementing this year. And we're starting with our school principals. We're providing supports and resources for the principals to be able to lead that work with their schools. We also have Jenny DeWald's leading that work with our reading intervention teachers. Tara House is leading it with our EL coordinators. And Susie Phoebus is leading it with the coaches' support. And Karen Martin, Accelerated Learning, is going to be doing some improvement cycles with her teachers that do accelerated learning. So the idea being we're all on the same page. So the big three: assessment, student learning management, and then effective PLCs that do improvement cycles. Plan, do, study, act. Feels a little better.
So Trustee Larson, you have lots of questions and comments. So what I would like to know is what other forms of data do you and the board want to look at? What are you curious about? Down to the school site level, down to the grade level, and I'm hearing cohort as well level. So what we can do is present that at a future date. We can make a study session out of it. And we can look at that cohort data, not only with our state assessments, but then one trimester of the STAR in that respect. And I think perhaps too, if you're willing and interested, looking at understanding what a plan, do, study, act is. Because I'm getting a sense that that might be something that you might be interested in that respect. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Val. And now 14.3, Accelerated Learning Services. It's after the presentation.
All right. Well, thank you, Superintendent Geisels, and the members of the board and the executive cabinet for the opportunity to present tonight. And
Is the little green button on underneath, Karen?
there we go.
There you go.
All right. So tonight, I'll provide a brief overview of accelerated learning services in our school district. And it's great to be back in the boardroom. It was a long time ago that I stood here when we began this journey with some familiar faces, and we have a lot of new faces. And so I'm excited tonight to present to you all really just kind of some of the basics. We won't be diving into a lot of data, so I just want to put that up front. Just really helping to give you all an overview of what our services are. Let's see. There we go. All right, yeah. So tonight, like I said, we're just going to dive into the why and then what our services look like. Equity and identification, which is very important to me, and how we've made tremendous progress with that in our school district. It's something I'm very proud of and that we'll be continuing. And then what are the next steps that we want to do to continue to make sure that our accelerated learning services are the best that they can be for our students in this school district. So why do we need accelerated learning services? Well, that was a pretty heavy presentation that we just finished. So we need a little levity. And I'm a teacher in my core, and it's hard for me to stand behind a podium. I want to move around. And so to understand why accelerated learning services are needed, it's helpful to experience how students with gifted behaviors think differently. And so kids with gifted behaviors, they thrive on complexity. And so I've given each board member and members of the cabinet one of my students' favorite games, and when I say favorite, I mean like absolute favorite game, and Kirsten is nodding her head because her daughter has played this game many years ago. And this game is called Qubits, and while this slide is up, what I'd like you to do is try to arrange your block pieces to create one of the designs that's shown on the screen. You get to choose the design, and you can arrange your blocks in various ways to create the designs. This game, and I kid you not, this game is like a jolt of caffeine for the students that I work with. They get extremely excited. The complexity fires up their brains and it deeply engages them. And they are able to make sense of ambiguity quickly. And they see patterns that a lot of us have a very difficult time seeing or may take us a long time to see. Their brains work differently, and they may need different educational experiences and supports in order to reach their potential. Anybody need more time? No, well, you didn't say start. Awesome. All right. Well, I'm going to change the slide now, but it is an addictive game. It's really fun. The kids that I worked with used to love to have tournaments with these, and anytime I had a substitute teacher, it was like, can we do qubits? We want to do qubits. They absolutely thrive on this type of activity that engages their brains. Next. Kids with gifted behaviors need brain peers. They often enjoy spending time with older people who can meet or exceed their level of interest in a specific topic, and they often love to immerse themselves in a topic. If they do not have an intellectual peer to share their intense interests with, they may move from one topic to another, exhausting their parents, exhausting their teachers, and feeling frustrated themselves. These kids crave intellectual peers, not just age peers. It is important for kids with gifted behaviors to have some time during the day with intellectual peers. Kids with gifted behaviors have a higher minimum speed limit for their brain. And what that means, it's like brains are like bicycles. I like using this metaphor. They have a minimum speed limit. Think about a bike. If it rolls too slowly, it gets wobbly. It's going to fall over, right? Well, same with our brains. And when we think about the brains of our highly capable students, it's like a bike in that if it's moving too slowly, they get distracted, they stop paying attention, they're bored, they're frustrated, they start acting out. These kids need the content to move faster in order to learn effectively. And there's abundant research that shows that kids with gifted behaviors perform better academically when the pace of the teaching moves faster than what is regularly expected. Whoops, it's a different one there. Unfortunately, sometimes these kids may end up sitting through content that they may already know, or that they can understand with one repetition rather than 5 or 7 repetitions. This graph just shows how advanced students often do not need as much time to master the content as their age peers. In fact, yeah.
In that last slide,
Yes.
That was 1998.
It's an old one, yes.
Yeah,
And
what do you think our students would have for the green?
You know what? That would be a wonderful study to do. And I've tried to find more updated versions of it. There is definitely limited funding for research with our advanced students. A lot of our funding nationally goes to looking at other student groups. And so it is difficult to find more recent data on that. And I would like to, and Val and I have these conversations on a regular basis. And one of the things that I'll speak to a little bit later in the presentation is including this subgroup in that data when she had student groups. That GATE really should be, our gifted students really should be another student group that's taken a look at as a cohort. And we need to look at that data going across the line. And I put this slide in here because it's, what we want to do in our district is make sure that that isn't the way that it is. And that's why we have, it's part of the why, that's why we have accelerated learning services, so we don't have a situation like that. And my guess is that it wouldn't be that dire.
25 days.
Yeah, but you know, when you talk to a lot of students, some of them feel about like that. So anyway, another interesting point is that one study cited that the most prevalent off-task behavior for our academically advanced students is waiting. Their brains work differently, and they need different educational experiences and support to reach their potential. And that brings us to why we ended up doing what we did in 2014. We radically changed our model of services, thanks to several of our board members that are sitting here who approved that change. And what we now have is a needs-based model where it's a tiered system of support, just like our services for our struggling students or our services for our English language learners are tiered supports. We want to make sure that our supports for our advanced learners are tiered as well. And we know, and Val talks a lot about this, Val and I have a lot of, conversations about the importance of effective first instruction in Tier 1. That's our goal, right? And my job, and the job of our accelerated learning teachers, is to provide Tier 1 support, provide Tier 2 support, and provide Tier 3 support. We know that the classroom teacher has a lot going on. There's a lot of different needs within that classroom. And yes, we want to make sure that we can provide that support within the regular classroom, but we know that sometimes that's just really a challenge to do. And so we have Tier 2 support, which with accelerated learners, that looks like flexible grouping within the classroom. It may look like our walk to learn time, like with our ELD time at our elementary school, sites, where we're walking to learn for English language learning, and where we might have during math classes, we do flexible math groups, which Ashley Donahue will talk about. At the middle school level, it's honors classes or advanced math pathways. At the high school, Tier 2 would be AP courses, honors courses, or dual enrollment at Sierra College. Tier 3 is really for, it's intensive intervention where we use personal learning plans to support students' academic or social emotional needs, or it might be academic acceleration, single subject, or full grade level acceleration. So where have we been, just briefly? I mentioned I stood here before the board in 2014, a long time ago. That's when my kids would have been here and playing, and now they're getting ready to graduate from high school. So it's been a long journey, and I have to stop sometimes and just think how far we've come, because we've really made tremendous progress. And just reflecting back and putting together the presentation tonight, it is exciting how supportive our district has been to make sure that all our students are achieving at the levels that support their potential, and to make sure that all students are growing. So in 2014, we used to just have GATE. That's what is, gifted education. It was like an hour before school enrichment program. And we knew that our students weren't just academically gifted 1 hour before school. It's during the day, all during their life. And so we wanted to change our services to a needs-based model where we address their needs during the school day. And that's what we did with the Accelerated Learning Program in 2014. We developed an Accelerated Learning Plan that was adopted by the board, and we shifted to a needs-based model with tiered support, with our supports during the day, which is a radically different approach at that time. And just a fun little aside, the girls in that picture, they're now seniors, and there were 4 girls actually in that first class that I did that was during the school day accelerated learning class. And they were doing passion projects, which Galen walked around and looked at back then, maybe you remember. And they were really interested in creating an acting club. And so they got this, they were looking for support, and we contacted Kidscape Productions in Reno, and they helped these kids out. And to this day, Kidscape Productions is a very active part of the Glenshire enrichment program, and these kids started that program, which is pretty neat. It's all about creative productivity, which Ashley will talk about later. So in 2017, my position was made a district-wide position to support all the schools, not just Glenshire and Truckee Elementary School. Ashley Donahue was hired as a full-time accelerated learning teacher. We were extremely fortunate to get Ashley Donahue. She came to us from Washoe County with 11 years of teaching experience in gifted education. So it was wonderful to have a thinking partner, and she brings tremendous experience in that field and expertise to our school district. We also hired part-time teachers at Kings Beach and Tahoe Lake. And ACMS started integrating their services during the day into their Reading Foundations class. And we made significant changes to our master plan. And we've also changed how we do our universal screening. And now Ashley Donahue is going to speak briefly about our model of services as far as the accelerated learning objectives and what that model is based on.
The Accelerated Learning Program is based on Dr. Joseph Renzulli's gifted behavior model that comes out of the University of Connecticut. And it focuses on above average ability, creativity, and task commitment. Gifted behavior is not static. It waxes and wanes, it grows and develops over time. Individuals do not exhibit gifted behavior all of the time. Even Einstein did not exhibit gifted behaviors all of the time. It occurs in certain people at certain times and under certain circumstances. Studies have been done of adults reaching eminence in their careers, and not only do they have above average ability, but it's shown how important creativity and task commitment is. It's a crucial role in their success. Oh boy, sorry. I touched the wrong button. Thanks. As Karen shared, I'm a teacher at heart, and so this is not a familiar or comfortable place for me to be. Thank you. There we go. Sorry about that. Accelerated learning objectives and curriculum focus are based on the gifted behavior model. And they are creative productivity, advanced academics, and social emotional awareness. Creative productivity is an individual's original and interesting thinking, curiosity, willingness to take risks, and openness to new ideas. Students in class learn and develop skills of creativity, which are fluency, flexibility, originality, and elaboration. And the real goal is to move students from consuming information through the process of being critical consumers and actually producers and making and doing things with the content that they're taking in. Advanced academics is an individual's ability to process information, integrate experience, think abstractly, and develop the capacity to acquire knowledge. The key components that we use with students is depth, complexity, novelty, and acceleration. Social emotional awareness related to task commitment is an individual's focus, perseverance, dedication, and ability to carry out work. So with this one, we help students execute their ideas to overcome challenges and struggles and things that might come up to bring that idea to fruition and not just giving up on that idea. They practice self-regulation strategies, goal setting, and self-reflection. And this slide is there's just a couple of pictures of some students in action. These specific examples, one is the two with the computers are this year in hybrid learning. They were doing a team challenge where they had to build the strongest platform, and some members were at home and some members were at school with limited supplies, and they were practicing strategies of task commitment. And it was beginning of the year. I used this as like a foundation for developing community and working with each other and understanding each other better. The other is a task that students did in a flexible math group in 5th grade, where they were given a real-world situation. They had 4 small boxes that they had to pack in a large box with the least amount of empty space, and figuring out different ways to do that. And you see they have some manipulatives there. 4th and 5th grade classes also experience investigating learning preferences that are related to their brain. Inspirational individuals who experience failure and risk, so they take a deep look at an individual. Curiosities and puzzlements to develop that creative productivity. Design thinking process is used, and that is driven all by students' questions, and some examples of that have been designing and building tiny homes, constructing a roller coaster, writing a choose your own adventure story. They really are a wide variety. And students also do passion projects to get at their individual curiosities. In 3rd through 5th grade, at both of my sites, I run flexible math groups. Those I developed pre-assessments for each unit in math using the proficiency scales and the priority standards. Students are pre-assessed before each unit in math in those grade levels, and groups remain fluid throughout the year. Developing and using the pre-assessments have created a culture of pre-assessing so that teachers know where their students are. It's improved first instruction, and it's leading to more targeted Tier 2 instruction. I also provide tiered support for teachers, K-5. I work with teachers to build capacity within the school as well as meet the students' individual students or groups of students' needs in their classrooms. Turn it back over here.
All right. So now we're going to dive into Tier 3 and what specifically that looks like. I talked already a little bit about academic acceleration. There's different types of academic acceleration. You in your packets have the page that is the acceleration guidelines. We developed those 3 years ago. Prior to that, our district did not have consistent guidelines for acceleration. So that's something that I'm really proud of that has been very helpful. And now the word has gotten out, and when principals or have teachers or parents, students that are interested in single subject acceleration or full grade level acceleration, they know to contact me, and I help guide them through that process, kind of like an SST. And just this year, I have had 4 requests already to take a look at either single subject acceleration or full grade level acceleration, and it's so wonderful to have these guidelines. And they're based on best practices and research in the field of gifted education. All right,
Can I
and
ask
next.
one question?
Absolutely.
When you asked for those, just, that's exciting, you've got 4 already, which is good. Do the parents then go to the principal, and then the principal goes to you, or do the parents just go directly to you?
So what happens is I always communicate directly with principals, and anytime anything is happening at a site, we always want to direct the communication through the principal. But sometimes, like parents might know, they might look at the website, oh, Karen Martin, lead accelerated learning teacher. They might email me directly, but I always go directly back to the principal because that's a team decision. Like an acceleration decision requires teachers and admin, and so it's quite a process. So does that answer your question? Yeah, no, it goes through that site, definitely. It's a team approach. Okay. So personal learning plans, that's another Tier 3 support that we can start. I am actually working with a teacher, and you'll be receiving her video because she gave it to me today, so it's too late to include in the presentation. But we have a teacher at Truckee Elementary School who's working with a TK student right now, and we are working on developing a personal learning plan for that TK student because that student is extremely capable, extremely bright, reading and writing, and at TK4. And so definitely it's overwhelming for the teacher to try to deal with that. And so I've been working directly with that teacher, developing personal learning plan, and that's an example of that Tier 3 support. And now I have a parent with us tonight to speak, because I always I want other people to speak as well. And Paul is going to speak to us tonight, Paul Bancroft, about his experience in having a personal learning plan for his own child. So.
Good evening. Thanks for having us. We dropped our kids off with Grandma tonight to be here, so thank you all for being a part of our date night. And I don't know if this is what you had in mind, babe, but here we are. So yeah, I'm the parent of a TKer and 4th grader at Kings Beach Elementary, but I want to talk just a little bit about our 4th grader. So when our daughter was in kindergarten, her teacher identified gifted behaviors in her and reached out to Karen and Kyle and Jessica to start talking about and putting together a personal learning plan. That personal learning plan has carried it into 4th grade every year. We sit down, we go through it with the teacher and that team and come up with supplemental academic exposures and activities for our daughter to keep her challenged and to keep her engaged. She's an extremely quick learner, and she fits into that one chart of a lot of waiting and doing a lot of knuckle cracking and fingernail biting while she's waiting for things to get caught up. So we're extremely grateful for the personal learning plan process. And not only has it benefited our daughter, but it benefits us as parents as well. It's not the easiest thing also parenting gifted children. It comes with a lot of challenges, and it has helped us a lot in our parenting and in our approach with our daughter. And Karen and Jess have provided a ton of resources for us, books and videos, and got us connected with Davidson Young Scholars in Reno to start pursuing different avenues and ways to explore. And we noticed over the years that when our daughter's not challenged and engaged at school, oh my gosh, things get really difficult at home, and the behavior is, can go to some dark places. And it's when she's engaged and pushed and feeling challenged at school that things get a lot better. So it really benefits parents as much as it's benefiting the children. So fast forward, we're in 4th grade. We've been really excited because that's when the GATE program officially starts, and we've been really looking forward to her engaging in a structured program in addition to her PLP. And we were really disappointed to find out that KBE does not have a GATE teacher this year. And so one of the slides a minute ago that Karen shared showed that there's a full-time GATE instructor who's with us tonight for the Truckee sites, but 0.1 FTE for Lakeside. That decimal's on the wrong side. And so as a parent, I'd love to advocate for equitable and equal allocation of resources to Lake kids as well as to Truckee students. And whether you can participate in GATE shouldn't be contingent upon the community you live in or the school that you are attending. So hopefully we can get it up and running for our Lake kids as well. So thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Thank you for sharing your experiences as a parent. And next, Next. Next. There we go. Okay. As I mentioned in the beginning, equity and identification is very, very important to me personally. And tonight, and I want to explain the reason why. Historically, students of color and English language learners have been underrepresented in the identification process for gifted education programs nationally. And it's our goal to have the percent of English language learners and socioeconomically disadvantaged students served by accelerated learning programs to mirror the percentage of English language learners and socioeconomically disadvantaged students as a whole in our whole district. And we have some big celebrations to make in this area. Last year, 33% of the students that we identified in that cohort last year that took the test and we identified, 33% of those students were either were English language learners or socioeconomically disadvantaged. That total percentage for our district is about 42%. So that is actually, compared to districts in other states and in other places, that's actually, you know, getting closer and closer and closer, talking about closing the achievement gap. I mean, this is not an achievement gap, but we are working very hard to make sure that that number of students, because we know that mirrors our total district numbers, because we know that there are academically gifted students from all backgrounds, all cultural backgrounds, all language backgrounds, and all socioeconomic levels. So how did we do this? Well, this is an area, obviously, I'm very passionate about. I've gone to lots of trainings. I read tons of books, all the latest articles. What is it that we need to do as a district to make sure that we are inclusive in our identification processes? So first thing we did is we changed our universal screening test. We used to use the Otis Lennon School Ability Test. Now we use the Naglieri Nonverbal Abilities Test, 3rd edition, the NNAT3. That's supposed to be a more linguistically and culturally less biased test. However, anecdotally, we found that we're not sure we're getting those kind of results just from using this test that we had hoped. So we do what any good practices would guide us towards doing, is we use multiple measures. We use multiple assessments. And we use a lot. And on that identification criteria page that you all have, it lists all the different pathways for identification. It's not just one test that a student takes at one time, because we know that's such a tiny snapshot for a student. So we also use the HOPE teacher rating scales. Those were developed actually to help identify Native American students, which is actually the most underrepresented population in academically gifted programs. So we use the HOPE rating scales. And we also take a look at other data as well. But one of the most important things that we do, and because we're a small district we can do this, is I sit down at each site with the site accelerated learning teacher and the principal, and I go over the NNAT scores, and I have the CAS scores, and I have other data points, and our STAR scores, and then we have the list of EL students and the list of SED students, and we cross-reference. And I will go through and I ask the teachers, do you know of any students that are exhibiting these behaviors in your classrooms? And we also have behavior checklists that we use. Teachers might say, oh, well, yeah, there's this one student. So we're not just looking at one score. We're looking at all sorts of data points to try to identify and lift up all those students who we think might be a good fit with these services. So that's how we've achieved that progress. And this graph right here, this shows how we've only been keeping track of this for the last 3 years. That's when we made the switch to the Naglieri test. And so in 2018, that was 31%. We had a dip in 2019-20 primarily because I didn't go around and meet individually with all of the principals, and there wasn't that intensive team approach to identifying those students. And then just this last year, we were at 33%. So, and I'm sure that we'll be seeing that improve because I work very hard in that area to make sure that we're identifying students. And the word's getting out. And what's great is now, the one thing that's really exciting is now, like last year at the end of the year, a teacher, 6th grade teacher, reached out to me and said, wow, I have these kids that I don't know that, like, I don't think they're in the gifted program, but just listening to them talk and the questions that they're asking, and they were 2 English language learner students, and sure enough, in elementary school, they had been in flexible groups with Mrs. Donahue, and so then we did the Hope rating scales and other things, and we were able to identify those students. And oftentimes people are like, why are we identifying the students? What's the purpose? Well, just like we identify any student group, so we can help provide better supports and services. And I keep track of those students, and what we want to do, I'm jumping ahead to the next step, so maybe I'll just wait till I get to the next steps to address the other issue about how we want to keep track of those students. And current staffing resources. Val, I don't know if you want to talk about this, or it's pretty straightforward, but I mean, we have different staffing at the sites at this point. Originally, back in 2014, I was made a 1.0 that was approved by the board, and then we added in another position, and the idea was to roll those services out across the district as we proved their efficacy. And so, we're at another crossroads where, people feel like we're ready to expand again.
Yes, I just wanted to add, just capitalizing on what Karen said before about the Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3. So even though we may have some balancing we need to do with our allocations for accelerated learning services, we do still have supports for the students at the schools. We still have accelerating learning services. Karen is quick to get out there and support the teachers and making sure that the needs are met, and then obviously working through the personal learning plans. So I just wanted to give you some reassurance that while we're looking at this issue, that students' needs are still being met.
All right.
Okay, Karen's gonna wrap it up.
I'm trying to wrap it up super fast here. And program improvement goals. Consistency is important, as we know. And like I mentioned, with Ashley Donahue being over here for 5 years, she's really been able to establish relationships and make a difference in programming. And what that does is it starts lifting up all students, right? Like when we're doing pre-assessments, and she's created this culture of pre-assessments, that affects all the students in those grade levels, because then we're doing more targeted instruction. Our teachers in those math classes then know really where those students are, because truly, this is the one thing that I really work on when I'm speaking with teachers, is that you can't have true differentiation if you don't have pre-assessments, if you don't know where your students are. If we're just saying we're differentiating but we're not pre-assessing, like, the two go hand in hand. The next piece there is vertical articulation of services. I think we've done an excellent job when I look back over the last 8 years of expanding our services and really dialing in those services and how they uphold those 3 accelerated learning curriculum objectives. But I think we have some work to do at the middle school level as far as continuation of those services and how we can improve there. Staff professional development with the high reliability schools model and use of proficiency scales. A lot of teachers reach out to me. I need help with level 4 activities. I don't know, when do I know if a student's at a 4 or a 3? Can you help me develop low floor, high ceiling activities that all students can access? Because that's another issue that's really important to me, is that all students should be able to access those high levels of learning, and we want to empower our teachers and build capacity so that they are teaching in those ways where all students are having those opportunities to reach up to level 4 learning activities, and that's through professional development.
Yeah,
Yes?
that's what I was just going to ask. So that with all this, it's great, this accelerated learning for some of the kids, and then you put them in the same classrooms with all the regular other learners. And I was just going to wonder if that's something that, once you get that exposure to a kid who may not be gifted, they may be able to jump to that level. Or, I mean, they're not isolating these kids out, so they're back in the same classroom. So it's actually, you're just raising the bar.
It's a combination. It's a combination because research shows that really it's that combination that's really effective, right? That sometimes, like I mentioned in the very beginning, those students need those brain peers. They need some time with intellectual peers. And so a lot of research shows that sometime during the day, it's great to have, whether that's flexible grouping within your class or between classes, pull-out program. Like what Ashley does is they receive direct instruction for part of the time, and then there's some walking to learn happening. So it's fluid. And I think that's the most important word, is it's fluid. Yeah. The other area for program improvement would be to systematize our evaluation of program efficacy with surveys and better tracking of student data. That's what I'm excited about EduClimber. I'm getting trained tomorrow so that I can start to pull that data more, because what I really want to do is see how are our students who are taking the AP exams at the high school, who's taking those AP exams and how are they doing? Are they getting mostly 1s and 2s? Are they getting 4s and 5s and 3s and 4s and 5s? You know, if we have AP classes, we don't want just our students to be getting 1s on them, we want our students to be doing well on them. So I want to track more of that data and who's taking the classes, who's not taking the classes. And then also the CASP data and STAR data. Because a long time ago when I was working at a site, I would look at the STAR data and I would dive deep into it. And one of the things that we noticed that was really interesting was that for some of our absolute, our highest readers that were reading like 4 and 5 grade levels above, their highest STAR scores would be the first STAR score of the year. And then they would plateau out or dip, and their reading accelerated over the summer, and then it would plateau out. So that's just interesting data. And that is pretty much it. So I will have a seat, and if you have any questions, let us know.
Any questions from the board members?
Karen, I was going to ask, how have we, well, you probably now, we've been able to catch more of them, but are we seeing a bigger number? I don't know if I saw the number, like how many accelerated kids do we have that you're now working with?
I couldn't hear the last part of the question.
No, sorry. How many kids do we have in our district that are classified as accelerated?
Okay, so you know, you're bringing up a great point.
Sorry.
People that may be watching.
Yes, sure. So you bring up a great point. There's formally identified academically gifted students, and that total number in our district is 294 students. But our accelerated learning is a big umbrella, and GATE is one tiny slice of the pie. And so if we were to look at like what's the total number of accelerated learners, like students benefiting from accelerated learning services, that's a pretty big number. That would, in my opinion, that would include like all students benefiting from that tier 2. So the students that are enrolled in honors and AP classes, and students who are enrolled in concurrent classes at Sierra College, our advanced math pathways, the flexible math groups with Ashley Donahue. So it's a larger number. I can put that together for you, but it's more fluid. So if I put it on a graph, you just have to know it's not a static number.
Ms. Martin, I have a question. The students in the Accelerated Learning Program, or that you identify, the 30% or, you know, in the future, how do they do on the standardized tests?
That is what I would like to know, and I would like to see that as a student group, as one of the student groups when we're analyzing CASP data. I think that's really important to include that group when we're looking at our district-wide performance. And that's one thing that in the last 2 years, I don't know, and I can't answer that question right now, but I will be able to answer it within the next month because I'm participating in the EduClimber training, so I'll be able to know how to mine that data. So I would love to prepare a report back for you all that has more of that data, like the STAR data and the CASP data for those students.
Great, thank you. And on one of your slides you show, I didn't see it come up.
You know what? I decided, yes, that slide right there. We decided to take that slide out just because it's enrollment at each site. And what it basically does is it doesn't really say anything different than what that graph with the blue shows. It's just enrollment of formally identified academically gifted students at each site, and then the red represents the number of English language learners or SED students at each site. But percentages, I think, are a better way to look at it. And the other thing is that my emphasis with this presentation and what I really like to focus on is the accelerated learning umbrella, and our formally identified academically gifted is one piece of that. So I felt like in putting that graph up, it really focuses more on the GATE part of it, which is a little distracting from what there's a lot of services that accelerated learning provides. So that's why we decided to take it out, and also like time. So, but I'm more than happy to produce like a whole packet that would just be more data oriented. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation tonight was really just more of an overview versus a deep dive into data.
Any other questions from the board?
What else do you need from us?
What else do I need from you all?
Are we good? Are we, like, it just seems like you've got a lot going on. Is there anything else that we should be looking at that we could do to support what you have going on, besides what Paul said?
So I think that it's always great, as I tell my kids all the time, ask for what you want. You can always be told no, but always ask for what you want, right? So you asked, and I will answer. So ideally, in a perfect world, I think it would be important to have more consistency with our staffing at the lakeside. And so that's where the support of the board can be helpful in understanding that that consistency is important. So that's one area.
I think that consistency would be to keep our staff here. We can use Rideout. I think we should use Rideout. We can have staffing in Rideout, then you have a consistent staff. They'd stay at Rideout. Galen, you've got something.
Yeah, we do have a public comment. Jessica Darkenwald.
Hi, everybody. It is so nice to see you all in person, as opposed to on the screen. My name is Jessica Darkenwald, and I am the school counselor at Kings Beach Elementary. Can you hear me on this? I don't feel like yeah? Okay. Thank you for the opportunity to come and speak tonight. I did want to quickly advocate on behalf of the students on the lakeside, similar to some of the things that Paul had said. I've had the pleasure of working with Karen and the Kings Beach teaching staff throughout the years with respect to supporting our accelerated or our GATE students. And what I've really experienced is that these kids do have, I get so nervous I have to write down what I'm going to say. These kids do have both like unique and multifaceted needs, both academically and socially, emotionally. And they really do require, specific supports. And I'm really so grateful that Karen's position exists within our district. At KB, we've had between a 0.1 and a 0.2 allocated position. Our allocation is a 0.1, but Kyle has allocated another 0.1 to make it a 0.2 to make this position more lucrative and desirable for somebody, so that we can have somebody like Ashley, or, ideally we can do something like what what Trekiel and Glenshire do with splitting a full-time position, so that, we can really have the robust and fluid program that that Truckee has. In the past, our teachers have been super helpful with not only the 4th grade program, but with the students who have been identified in kindergarten. You can imagine that a kindergartner who's reading 2 or 3 grade levels above kindergarten does really need some specific and extra support. So I kind of skipped around a little bit. I didn't follow my plan. So right now, currently, we're waiting to hire somebody for our identified 4th and 5th grade students, as well as the accelerated learners and the lower grades. And what that means is that we don't have that Walk to Learn program that has been referred to a couple times today. Our identified 4th and 5th grade students are, again, waiting, that term that came up earlier, to receive the benefit of a finely tuned program. I'm really hopeful that you will all join me, and, you know, some of our parents and our teachers tonight in being creative and figuring out how to create a more sustainable position on the lakeside that's similar to the position that is on the Truckee side. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. Are there any other public comments? Well,
I do have another question.
go ahead.
Didn't we used to have a full-time person on the lakeside for gate? It's never been a full-time between the two elementary schools? And I say gate because that's how I knew it as. It wasn't, I don't think it was accelerated yet.
No, there's never been a full-time person on the lakeside. We have 2 full-time people with accelerated learning, myself and Ashley Donahue. And one thing as far as the consistency on the lakeside, when you end up with like 0.1 or 0.2 of a position, what happens is then you get this revolving door because, it's like an add-on type of position. And so at the lake, I wanted to mention this earlier, in the last 5 years, we've actually had 6 different teachers, 6 different accelerated learning teachers at Tahoe Lake and Kings Beach, and we've had one accelerated learning teacher on the Truckee side between Glenshire and Truckee because that was a full-time position. So that's that consistency part, right? When you have those little shreds of positions, they just turn over.
And thank you for the presentation, everybody, and parent. I will have to say that I have always been a very strong supporter of this GATE system, or this accelerated learning, even more. And I think about the resources, that these students represent. In 12, 20 years, they'll be the researchers of the world and, pulling us out of our mire, I hope. But thank you for what you're doing. So now, that's almost it. We have comments from board members.
Thank you, guys.
Kirsten?
Chris?
I don't have anything, thank you.
I'm just going to publicly say that I will not be here next board meeting because I'll be in Vermont. And it's 3 hours and I can't stay awake. Gotcha.
Oops. Wanted to add that, well, I love parties, those aren't party favors. I have to collect the little games. The board game.
So, I have a couple things. I did the Alice refresher, so if I get caught in a situation, I have an idea what to do. And I was gone last board meeting. So I don't think I've missed very many in 10 years, but we had a nice time in Yellowstone and then visiting our daughter.
Nice.
So, meeting adjourned.
Oh, thank you. That was good.